Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hype New Reviews. I'm Skurita and today we are going to talk about Superman 2025. This is one of those movies that were hyped to hell and back to me, so I took my time to wait for the hype wave to die down before handling it. While degrees of satisfaction varied, one thing that I kept hearing about was that Superman was good again, which tells you how far was the damage from the media such as the Snyder movies or the Injustice series, all 12 years old by now. I haven't seen every single movie by James Gunn, but I'm quite familiar with his work since the first video I made was about Creature Commandos, and I have a suspicion how his version of The Last Son of Krypton would turn out, so how did he fare? What is it about? Okay, let's be honest, everybody knows who this guy is, everybody knows who Superman is and what's his big deal. James Gunn, after taking the wheel of the DC universe, rebooted the Man of Steel and now blended elements of several of his iconic stories into a single plot. Superman, played by David Corenswet, Last Son of Krypton and 24 hours a day superhero, is having some problems. He is currently facing backlash from the US government and in some ways the public as well, after stopping the nation of Boravia from invading the neighboring country of Jahapur. Making things worse, he suffered his first defeat at the hands of the Hammer of Boravia, a mysterious super being that demands cessation of interference from the Man of Steel. To the surprise of absolutely no one that even remotely knows comic books, this is all a play on Ye-Oldebody Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, in an attempt to defeat Superman. Between Superman, who tries to just help people, and Luthor, who wants to conquer everything, stands Lois Lane, played by Rachel Brosnahan, and the Super Gang, composed by the Green Lantern Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion, the genius Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gattaghi, and Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced. Visuals. If there is something that I expected from Gunn was that, much to my delight, finally we have colors in the DC world. No, Captain Marvel doesn't count, shut up. The visuals sport a nice bright palette that is followed by every single character and locale. Finally I can see what's going on. Now, the biggest point of contention in these visual aspects will be the designs. Gunn chose something more comic book accurate, with robots look cartoonish, heroes using bright colors, while villains only use black. Even characters who canonically wear black, such as the Green Lantern, sport a more colorful variation of their uniforms. If you see a monster or a bizarre character, it will be as close as it can from the source material. This will put some people off, but again, it's mostly a matter of taste. I was okay with it and I think that it helps give the movie a less serious comic book feel. Now, as a director, James Gunn still has an uneven hand. Some of the shots will be good and funny, others will be somewhat messy. He favors action cameras that follow the characters around, swinging from one character to another, and some good transitions into the mix, or wobble whenever there is something going on, like a cameraman following the action around. There is also an obvious interest in showing Superman's iconic pose and his iconic S symbol shining as a beacon of hope. Something that I didn't like was that there is a constant blurry effect on the sides of the screen as if there were a lens flare ready to burst out, but that's a minor gripe. Acting. I started this section by saying that nobody can ever get remotely close to the late Christopher Reeve. He was downright a lightning in a bottle that knew every single facet of the character, from tone to body language, in absurd subtle ways. So I simply stopped comparing every single new Superman to him, and judge every single Superman actor on their own. Now, with this out of the way, David Corenswet did a fine job playing the Man of Steel, who is more human in this version. We can see that several times through the movie he struggles to remain a symbol of hope, but is more flawed. Some of his moments were a bit too corny for my tastes, but that's more for the writing. Everyone else did a fine job too, considering the character and writing constraints and limitations. This is a movie with at least 7 super beings that share screen time, so it's inevitable that only 1 or 2 will pop out. To me, these two were Nathan Fillion, who fit Guy like a glove, absolutely perfect choice and acting for the character, and Nicholas Hoult as Luthor, who delivered the most vitriolic lax seen on live action so far. Dude is in constant different states of violent hatred, from controlled to unhinged, and I'm amazed that he didn't have an ulcer so destructive that it tore the fabric of reality apart. Now, onto the bad side of Gunn's directing. His fight scenes aren't good. There is a weird over-reliance on the spinning combat camera used badly, where things just turn chaotic instead of showing what's going on. And in a movie already crammed with several characters, they last too long. To me, it felt that he didn't know when to let Superman take his gloves off to finish fights when they became too dangerous for innocents, so these fights dragged on. One thing about the Snyder movies is that his superpowered fights were actually cool. But again, that's the only thing I remember from the Snyder Superman besides Papa Kent being a maniac to suicidal levels, my distaste with everyone being miserable and the lack of more than 3 calls per scene, so Gunn's Superman still has an enormous advantage. No, seriously, I don't remember a single thing from Man of Steel and I prefer it to keep that way. But back to Gunn. One of the things that I really like about his fights is that finally, after Christopher Reeve's Superman, we have a Superman that's better caring about collateral damage again, doing his best to prevent buildings from being destroyed and innocents from being killed. And thanks for the comic book feel, our suspension of disbelief is maintained enough, so when Superman saves a woman at Mach 5 without turning her into marinara sauce, we are okay. On the other hand, this is nullified by the citizens of Metropolis being absolutely suicidal morons who would like to take selfies right next to a kaiju. There is a difference between people being used to danger and a whole city that is begging for a Darwin Awards. Writing. I knew what I was getting into when I watched this movie, and after doing so I have to say that please keep James Gunn in his vault where he can peruse old comics and resurrect characters that barely anyone remembers that they exist. Even if, a la Reanimator, they end up following the same mold. Even better, just give him Guy Gardner and let him write a Guy Gardner movie. It would be perfect. Give him the Flash on the side. That's because after watching all Guardians of the Galaxy movies, The Suicide Squad and Creature Commandos, it's obvious to me that he loves the lovable, good-intentioned loser archetype mixed with the group of misfits, which by itself is okay. This archetype helps to humanize characters through their flaws and make them sympathetic to the viewer, thus, when said character grows, the viewer feels as if they are growing with them. Star-Lord starts as a nobody that can barely talk about his upbringing and feelings, and ends a mature man that knows when to step down and take care of his emotional needs and health and move on, rekindling his relationship with his grandpa. Superman, on the other hand, pretty much like Kiryu from the Yakuza franchise, yes. Is the Bastion archetype. As in, he's the guy that is already grown up. It's not that he is devoid of flaws and problems, but he is the character that you go to when you need reassurance that everything will be okay. Their unwavering sense of justice is inspiring when you see the world throwing everything at them and they remain unwavering. Even Superman's original musical score is about a crescendo that explodes and turns into a reassuring melody going, "He is here, everything will be okay." While Batman's is a brooding song that starts with a low tone and then explodes in an aggressive tone to evoke the guy that comes from the darkness and kicks everyone's ass. Mind you, I'm not a purist that goes, "They ruined him" if Superman gets so much a tweak or two. For example, I liked My Adventures with Superman, where he isn't a Bastion yet. He is just a dorky teenager who has a sense of direction and kindness. The problem in this case is that for Gunn to turn Superman from a Bastion to a lovable loser, he had to change nearly everyone and everything as well. Framing, tone, the story itself, characterization, everyone in this movie is either an asshole, awkward, or both, treating Superman as the nerd they don't like to hang around with, but they do because he does everyone's math homework. Guy Gardner fits this style to a T, and Nathan Fillion was perfect for his role, but seeing Mr. Terrific and Hawker coldly dismissing Lois Warriors felt out of place. Lois herself gets this treatment. There is a scene in this movie where she interviews Superman and, to me, it's both one of, if not the worst scene of the movie, but also highlights the whole characterization problem. It shows a sarcastic Lois that descends to downright yellow journalism levels in a blink of an eye, and a Superman that mumbles excuses and has to scream about saving lives to get her to start listening to his point. This is where normally Superman and any Bastion character would harden up and defend their stance no matter what. Depending on the Superman, he could even offer some witty retorts like, "So it was okay when I stopped the Glorfiborgs from invading China," or "Do I need to talk to the mayor every time a bus is dangling from the bridge?" By the way, seriously, why the they have to turn literally every single Lois Lane into a hostile nowadays? I know that the old Lois was a Snoopy reporter and sometimes she's the jaded gal to Superman's optimism, but all modern depictions I've seen make her a borderline to downright unlikable creature. My friends and I actually asked ourselves what did he see in her? Because this Lois antagonizes Clark in every single way, even his music choices. She could have simply be given more patience to him and guide Superman into giving better answers, trying to cover his lack of journalistic experience since he is a superhero 24 hours per day and only 3 years as a Superman, thus justifying why he likes her and make the viewers like her more by proxy. Anyway, going on. This lovable loser archetype permeates the whole movie in a way it feels as if James Gunn was afraid that if there was a 100%, a single 100% genuine moment, as in genuinely hopeful, genuinely serious, etc., he'd be shot in the head. So whenever someone starts to be overly serious or people too genuinely hopeful for Superman or too emotionally open, expect awkward jokes to be thrown, shooting the mood on its knees. Clark's talking to his father in a bonding moment, Pa Kent starts to cry, whimpers about how he always starts crying, and Ma Kent jabs how he's an old mush. Dialogues end up being somewhat awkward because they can't be completely honest or serious with each other in ways that reminded me of Joss Whedon. Another problem with this is that you need a whole movie to make a lovable loser grow, and this is a 2-hour movie with 5 superpowered people and a convoluted plot about international borders, humanitarian rights, immigration, media outrage. Thus what's already a hurried pace that can't let anything breathe gets even worse. Other reviewers noted the constant exposition dumps. I agree somewhat. The comic book tone alleviated them, and I think that the first exposition screen was done well enough to cut to the chase. And this is my main gripe with the movie, how the need for Gunn to make the characters fit into his style instead of making his style fit the characters escalated in a domino effect that made everything have a messy pacing, some odd choices, constant jokes and problems. And even then, I still enjoyed this movie. If there is a thing that I like about Gunn is that he isn't afraid of bringing hard issues to the table with the subtlety of a brick to the face. I enjoy subtlety, but I do agree that sometimes a brick to the face is necessary. It's obvious that the answer to the question should we ignore political barriers in order to save innocents from being slaughtered for profit is of course! The idea that being good isn't related to being an immigrant or a natural born, with the first person helping Superman when he fails is a simple falafel vendor, while a Metropolis citizen callously condemns Superman's actions. Gunn has a good idea of how to balance comic book feel with overall impactful messages, even if he has several slips in the process, but that's for spoilers. And as usual, his research on the subject matter is exemplary. Keen eyes will see several references to old comic books and movies of the past, going so deep that only the mobile encyclopedias would be able to catch on everything. The interactions between characters whenever they are not hostile is enjoyable, and as usual, when the character fit the lovable loser archetype, they fit superbly into the narrative, like Guy Gardner or Jimmy Olsen. The opening exposition dump tells me that this is a movie about a Superman still at the beginning, but honestly I wouldn't for the love of God be able to catch on from the narrative itself because everything screams established. But nonetheless, it's still a hopeful albeit flawed Superman. He is, thank gods, a good person that offers nothing but kindness to all, and the disdain he receives thus ties up with the theme of rejecting said kindness, but the way where several people treat him as if a guy that beats kaijus was an annoying hassle does making him look like a loser. But it's his kindness that inspires people to help him and be better, and this is an integral part of the character that has been lost in the last 10 years. There is also the interesting dichotomy between Gunn's and Snyder's Superman. Snyder likes to nearly worship his power as something godlike, while Gunn tries to push him away from this divinity and bring him closer to humans. In the end, this is Gunn at his best and his worst. He offers a nice superhero storytelling with a messy development, kinda like an overeager kid trying to talk to you about why he loves this specific superhero so much. He talks too fast, he may have changed some things here and there, but it is still nice to hear him talking and his joy is infectious. Soundtrack. I honestly don't have strong feelings toward the soundtrack. It uses the iconic John Williams theme, but it's often in such a hurry to express that, yeah, this is Superman, that it eschews the build up and goes right at the main bang. The sound effects were quite pleasant to hear though, be the crunch of earth being shattered or the thud of a well done punch. Final thoughts. After seeing Creature Commandos, I expected this and I reinforced that James Gunn needs someone to proofread his scripts and question his ideas. While he is good, he has a personal style that should be used as a scalpel rather than a machete, meaning his style is meant for specific characters in specific situations. And when done in a broader sense, it starts to get damaging. I think it's a good Superman movie and I do recommend it, but I disagree about this being something superb. It's better than Snyder in the overall superhero ideal because not every single hero needs to be Batman, but at the same time it has some deficiencies, because not every single hero needs to be Star-Lord. Spoilers. Yeah, everything about the sudden plot twist wasn't good. For those who haven't seen the movie yet and for some reason went ahead to listen to the spoiler section, hey, I don't judge. Turns out that Superman was sent to Earth by his parents in order to conquer it. It was awfully telegraphic since people repeated all the time about how half of the message was lost, and Gunn shot himself in the foot, pun intended, with unintended consequences. Considering all the pro-immigration tone of the rest of the movie and his talk with Pa Kent, it's obvious that the message was about more we are what we choose to be. Yes, like the Iron Giant, where Clark is a good person regardless of the intention of his biological parents. But by making the Ls the equivalent of terrorists, not only it does validate serious worries from Lex Luthor, the villain, it also can be interpreted as you being an immigrant is fine as long as you erase everything from your past and embrace the USA. I honestly doubt that this was Gunn what he had in mind, but it's one of those things that could have been cleaned in a review of the script. And the worst thing about it is that, for the purposes of the movie's plot, the revelation of Superman parents being intended to be conquerors all along is simply used as a plot device seized by Lex in order to sabotage Superman's reputation so he can finally kill Superman and look as humanity's savior. If so, why didn't he simply use the Superman clone with the exact face to do so? Yes, Luthor has a Superman clone, and it's also obviously telegraphic since 5 minutes into the movie, we are shown that the Lock in the Fortress of Solitude reacts only to Superman's DNA. All Luthor had to do for the same plot to happen was to distract or put down Superman for 24 hours, using the kryptonite he already has, use his clone to unleash havoc, and then shows up to save everyone. There, simple. Speaking of Lex, this Lex of this movie was the most unhinged version so far, to the point my friends and I felt that he went way beyond the comic book line villain to the point he'd be simply executed by someone. It's one of the weaker aspects of Gunn's balance between realism and comic book logic. Normally, Lex Luthor is either a full-blown wanted villain or smart enough to not get his hands dirty and or never go beyond a threshold because he knows Superman could just tear him apart like a paper tissue. This Lex plays on both fields. On the bright side, the Russian roulette joke was actually morbid and funny, and seeing him being smashed around in the end was satisfying. It seems that Gunn's idea was to have Krypto maul him to give the audience some satisfaction since Superman wouldn't slap him around, and he was right. Lex captures Superman and brings him to a military base, and Lois asks for the help of the Justice Gang to save him. The gang isn't interested in potentially violating laws and defying the USA government, so only Mr. Terrific helps her, citing that it would piss off Green Lantern. I honestly expected Guy Gardner to be the one to help her, since in the comics he is the more anti-establishment punk of the Green Lanterns. And lastly, after an entire movie of everyone being snarky messy assholes, Supergirl shows up in the post-end credits and she's also a snarky messy asshole. I muttered, oh to that. That's all for today, thank you very much for listening everyone, and please like and subscribe. See y'all next week.